The following clip is from the North to South Show, live every Monday and Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, where we talk SEC football everything. Now, we'd love to have you out for next show, but for now, hit that like button down below, hit that subscribe button, and enjoy this clip. Pat Narduzzi's team will travel to Rocky Top, and I apologize, Tennessee fans, because I've been called out so much in all of my most recent videos for saying Vols instead of Vols. I apologize for that. It's my Canadian accent. My bad. I'll start calling them the Vols from now on and not put that Ols accent on the back of it. But whatever. Week 2, Pitt travels to Tennessee. And this is one, I talked about this game in my Tennessee early 2022 or 2021 prediction, And I picked Tennessee to beat as an automatic win against Pitt. And so many people argued with me, not just Pittsburgh fans. There was a lot of Tennessee fans who disagreed with me that Tennessee was going to go out and beat the Pitt Panthers next season. And that's what I want to talk about today. Kind of taking a second look at this game, gone more in depth in this game and everything. So I'm excited to bring you guys the best versus the rest segment, breaking down Tennessee versus Pitt. It's going to be an amazing, amazing segment. But also, just dropped my new Tennessee North to South Show hats. I got just the classic one, the show one here. Go get your Tennessee ones now. They'll be $25 in our store, which you can click the link in our bio or hit the little notification up above. So Pitt last season went 6-5, and on the road they went 2-3. Pitt last season, they got ranked, I'm pretty sure. They were ranked at points in the season. I think that they had a big win against Louisville. I think Louisville was probably their biggest win because Louisville was ranked at the time, but they struggled against Clemson. They struggled against Notre Dame. They got kicked pretty good by Notre Dame. And all in all, in the ACC, they were just an average team. They finished, I think they finished 6th in their division or something like that. It was a not bad season. Or it might have been 6th in the conference. It was a not bad season for Pat Narduzzi and his Pitt Panthers squad. So let's break in what Pitt is going into this season and how they're looking into the season, what they lost last year. So Pitt lost most of their talent on the defensive side, especially. You look at the defensive line and you look at the secondary. The D-line was one of the most successful in the country last season in getting to the quarterback in tackles for losses. People just didn't talk about them because, again, Pitt isn't one of those big time programs, but this D-line got after the quarterback and they got after the running back behind the line of scrimmage, I tell you that. Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver, and then Jalen Twyman. Even though Jalen Twyman did opt out last season, Weaver and Jones, I think combined for, I can't remember how many sacks they had. I think it was like 16.5 sacks that they combined for, but they were really dynamic as a duo on that D-line. And they were by far the two best players. And Twyman the season before had a really good season. So losing those 3 guys on the defensive line and the lack of depth that they have behind that at Pitt is going to be a really hard thing to rebuild over there for Pitt next season. You also look at the secondary, and they take massive hits, losing DeMar Hamlin, they lose Paris Ford, and they lose Jason Pinnock. They lost a ton on their defense. Although they do have all these losses, I think that they definitely have one of the better players in all of the ACC, and I do mean all the ACC, and Cam Bright at the linebacker position. He could go out and he could be the defensive player of the year in all of the ACC this season. Now, you look at guys, obviously you think the best defensive player in all the ACC, you instantly think of the guys at Clemson, the D-line at Clemson, but I tell you, Cam Bright could be up there for that ACC Defensive Player of the Year spot easily, 110%. You look at this offense. The offense is really confusing to me because I think it's a one dynamic offense. I think that this offense really pinpoints the throwing. You look at the rushing game last year for Pitt. They had one game with a rusher over 100 yards, and that was Vincent Davis against Georgia Tech, who I think rushed for like 237 yards, something like that. But other than that, him and A.J. Davis, their 2 running backs, did not have any big games. Like, you look at the stat lines for all those games, they're top rusher for all those games. Sometimes it was A.J. Davis, sometimes it was Vincent Davis. I keep getting them confused because they have the same last name. It is so confusing. But they only had one game with the rusher over 100 yards. So that tells you that this passing game is the big factor for Pitt in this season. So Pitt is really going to rely on Kenny Pickett and how he does at the quarterback position this year, because that was kind of where Pitt scored the most and got down the field the most was in the passing game. Last year, Pickett only threw 13 TDs, and he threw 9 interceptions last year. So Pitt as a whole wasn't a really, really scoring juggernaut. They weren't a team that really intimidates you with throwing the ball and running the ball and scoring, running up the scoreboard on you. But what they did do really well is defense. And as I talked before, they take a lot of hits on that defensive side of the ball. I think you look at the running back position, I said it again, A.J. Davis and Vincent Davis are going to have to step up. Someone's going to have to be the main guy and really, really, really work on this Pitt rushing game. I think the offensive line took a big hit on the interior guys that they lost. So as a whole, the rushing game for Pitt isn't looking that strong this season. But I look at the receiving game, and this is where I think most Pitt fans and people who follow Pitt would be optimistic. You look at guys like Jordan Addison. He was the main receiver, breakout freshman last year for Pitt. I think he's going to be the main guy this season. And then I also look at, especially watching the spring game, which I turned on some of the highlights of the Pitt spring game, Tasir Mack is another guy that I feel really optimistic about in this Pitt receiving core to be that big guy for Pickett this season. So those two guys I think are going to be the main guys for this receiving core for Pitt. But again, just talking about the defense again, the talent that they have under the guys that they lost, all those guys that I already mentioned. You look at Deslin Alexandre, you look at AJ Woods, and you look at Eric Howlett as the main guys to replace those guys that I talked about in the secondary and on the D-line. So what do I think of Pitt this season? I think that they're just going to be another average ACC team. And a lot of people feel strongly that this Pitt team is good enough to go out and beat Tennessee next season. So that's what I'm going to get into. My keys for Tennessee to win this game. I'm looking for a huge game for Tennessee offensively. Whoever's the quarterback at this point, I think it's definitely between Harrison Bailey and Hendon Hooker. We could even see Joe Milton. I think that Maurer's out of the picture, but that's just my opinion. Whoever's at the quarterback, this is their game to cement their starting role as the starting quarterback for Tennessee next season. The secondary's weak. Their D-line just got a lot weaker. Their linebacker core is good, but as a quarterback, this is your game to have a big game passing and overall just put up a lot of points on the board for Tennessee and have Tennessee Vols fans very, very excited for the rest of Josh Heupel's career at Tennessee. I think that this is a huge game. It's week 2. I think you play an easier team week 1. I can't remember who it was. I think it's like Texas Tech or something, or Tennessee Tech or something like that. But this is your first big game, out of conference game. Whoever is at quarterback, I think, has to have a big, big game. I think Jones needs to have a huge game in the receiving game. I think he's going to be a guy in this game with the secondary a bit weaker, going out and really picking apart this defense. I think Tennessee's going to take huge advantage of that. Get after Pickett in the quarterback position. He's not the most mobile guy ever. I think he only rushed a couple times last season, and when he does rush, he only averages like 2.2 yards a game or something like that. Get to him at the quarterback position because their O-line, again, is a lot weaker than a lot of people think they are. I think if Tennessee gets after the quarterback, they have a big game for their own quarterback, whoever that is, whether it's Hooker, whether it's Harrison Bailey. I think that they could go out and have a massive game here. All in all, I think that Tennessee is still going to win this game. I'm going to stay true to what I said in my 2021 Tennessee predictions and say Tennessee will go out and beat Pitt this season. My score prediction is 38-31 for Tennessee. Now, in that video, I did say that this was going to be an automatic win for Tennessee. Do I think it's going to be an automatic win for Tennessee still? No. I'd give Pitt a lot more credit than what I gave them in that video, but ultimately, I still feel really, really strong that Tennessee will come out with a win in this game. It's an out-of-conference game. It's a game that many Volunteers fans are going to be excited for because it's kind of the start of Heupel's career, because it's your first big game of his whole tenure at Tennessee, however long that is. And I'm expecting Neyland Stadium to be packed, like full capacity crowd, and the fans are just going to have a great time. So I'm taking Tennessee 38 and the Pitt Panthers 31.